Well, good afternoon. I'm so excited for this next panel in this discussion. As you all know, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act offers an unprecedented opportunity to accelerate the momentum around careers that pay higher wages, require short-term credentials, and also create a need for a new generation of talent. And then on top of that, just this past summer, Congress passed the CHIPS Act, which is designed to boost U.S. competitiveness, innovation, and national security. The law seeks to jumpstart R&D and commercialization of leading-edge technologies such as quantum computing, AI, clean energy, and nanotechnology. It also provides $53 billion to catalyze semiconductor manufacturing, R&D, and workforce development, with another $24 billion worth of tax credits for chip production. There's also $3 billion slated for programs aimed at leading-edge technology and wireless supply chains. The Semiconductor Industry Association expects this funding will create more than 280,000 new jobs that really reach across all skill levels, everything from blue collar to high skilled jobs in the semiconductor plants. The challenge now is developing the systems to provide workers with the skills needed to secure these jobs. Joining us to discuss the workforce challenges and opportunities created by CHIPS and the infrastructure bills are two incredible experts. We're joined with Christy Pambianchi, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer at Intel Corporation. As CPO, she is responsible for driving Intel's people strategy and fostering a culture focused on bold innovation, flawless execution, and continuous development and learning. She was previously at Verizon, where she served as the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer. And she also recently served as Executive Vice President for People and Digital at Corning. Also joining us is Dr. John Smee, who's the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Qualcomm Technologies. He joined Qualcomm in 2000, holds over 75 patents, has been involved in the system design for a variety of wireless communication systems, many that you're using exactly at this moment. He is currently a 5G project engineering lead in Qualcomm's wireless research and development group. So, Christy, let's start with you. How will the CHIPS Act affect the labor needs in this industry over the next decade?
Thanks for inviting me to this panel, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. I think that the CHIPS Act really presents a super opportunity for workforce development and opportunities here in the United States. And we've seen estimates that the CHIPS Act could create demand for up to 300,000 new workers over the next several years. For us at Intel, we have 4 new fabs in Arizona and Ohio alone. And over the course of those projects, we expect to create 6,000 direct hires, 6,000 contract workers, and many thousands of additional jobs through our supply chain and other partners that could be up to 70,000 total jobs. And we also recently opened a new fab in Oregon, and we're investing very heavily in our packaging operations in New Mexico. So, given these needs, we've already begun work to expand the talent pipelines we need in the areas where we're operating, as well as in some cases across the country for some of the roles. And so I think that it's revitalizing an entire industry and a segment that has a whole ecosystem around it. So it's going to drive a massive need for workforce development, and at the same time create amazing opportunities for talent and workers in the country.
John, let's bring you into the conversation, just because all these amazing jobs that are going to be created, but also there's the risk, I think, of current, but also over this next decade of mismatches, of skill shortages in terms of the skills that are required for these 300,000 jobs versus what is available right now in the existing workforce. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? What are the skills and education levels that we have an acute shortage now, and how are you thinking about addressing it?
Yeah, and it's a really important way to look at it, because we're really at an unprecedented time in terms of the opportunity for the United States to regain our global leadership in this important area. And so then when we look at the skills needed to really fulfill this semiconductor continued growth, it's not only about, bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and PhDs, but then also about skilled tradespeople, whether that's for the manufacturing side, the technician side, the testing side. So it really is about that need to have the skills talent. And it's not just about the degrees they're getting granted, but even the full end-to-end pipeline from STEM all the way through to universities. And so making sure as a country we're working together to grow this diverse talent pipeline, but then making sure that from a critical technology standpoint, the semiconductor design work, the fab side, the end-to-end view of the ecosystem, it's really about working together to have that innovation focus to really make sure that we're creating value from market leadership and recognizing that there really is a global talent race for making sure the United States maintains its technical edge here.
Can you unpack a little bit? So one of the things I love talking to people in the semiconductor industry is that they live 5 to 10 years out. We're all using the chips right now, but they're living in the chips that are getting produced 5 years out that are going to enable a whole new generation of technology and innovation. So maybe over that like longer term horizon, what would you encourage people to focus on in terms of the skills that we need to be cultivating now in our high schools, in our community college, and our college pathways to prepare them for those new skill demands 5 years from now? Maybe Christy, let's start with you, and then John, I'll come back to you to answer that.
I think that, as you know, John, it's really an across the board, every facet of, we need to think about the education system and worker pipelines. And so I think we definitely are seeing shortages across the board in the workforce, whether that's trade workers that we need to actually do the construction and the building of the new fabs, all the way through to the technicians that we need to operate the facilities, electrical engineers to develop the new technologies, to our chip designers, et cetera, software engineers. So kind of across the whole gamut. And if I were to pick what's the most urgent at the most macro level, I think we need to continue to encourage more and more students in America to pursue education and careers in STEM fields. And this includes, education and encouragement into electrical engineering, computer science, chemistry, materials engineering, or into, say, 2-year degree programs to become a technician. And then that can lead to additional education. And we like to say, like, Pat, our CEO, started as a technician. And he started with a community college degree, and he went on to get a degree and a master's. He's CEO of Intel now. He, like John, is a inventor and an engineer with many patents. And so I think this is definitely a challenge that industry, ourselves as companies can't really solve alone. We do a lot collaboratively across, partnerships with fellow employers, the semiconductor associations and things such as that. But this is really a perfect example of where public-private partnership can really drive a great difference. In the way the CHIPS Act is constructed, it kind of begins to set up a blueprint for that. And so I think those are just a few of the examples I would put there.
That's great. Thank you. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, following up on Christy's points, there really is that emphasis on things like electrical engineering, computer science, software development, mathematics, even the material sciences. And I think that's what's interesting with the CHIPS Plus Sciences Act, is it makes sure to address it holistically in terms of making sure there is that talent pipeline and then also that innovative research. So that funding levels, it's really important to make sure that translates then into different types of skills. And so then you start early with the STEM, and that's that focus on mathematics, coding. And if we look at Qualcomm's work here, we're really focused on that end-to-end talent pipeline, making sure that more students are able to enter in those focused STEM fields, whether it's first robotics or the Think a Bit lab development, bringing in more types of students. And then following that up with targeted funding of, say, graduate students with innovation fellowships, with this perspective of really mentoring. And I think that's where we can partner across the United States between industry, government. That public-private partnership opportunity is where we work together to identify these longer-term challenges and make sure we're focusing on the right things. And I think that's what we've been really enthusiastic to see with that broad CHIPS Plus Sciences focus. It's not just on the semiconductor side, it's really also bringing in quantum, bringing in artificial intelligence, bringing in technologies like 6G communications. So making sure that we're looking at not only the design side of where are these future opportunities going to be, but then making sure we can follow up with domestic semiconductor industry on the resiliency, on the supply chain side, on that end-to-end design. So it's a really exciting time to be a student entering this field. And it's really about continuing to focus on those core fundamental science skills.
So important. We also got a taste of the future of AI this weekend with the chat CPT. Everyone's been playing around with prompts for it. It just seems to have captured the interest and also the challenge with AI. So I love that. I want to come back. Something, Christy, you said, you talked about the importance of public-private partnerships. And I know the CHIPS implementation plan that the Department of Commerce released, it said that as in the process of awarding the semiconductor funds, it's going to place an emphasis on plans that encourage projects that include effective and creative workforce development solutions at scale. And so, what advice would you have for governors and mayors in these regions, including business leaders that are beginning to think about their plans? What should they be doing from a human capital standpoint to set themselves up to successfully compete for these funds? We'll start, Christy, and then John, I'd love your thoughts on this too.
So when we were doing our site selection, one of the things that really stood out with Ohio was the strong engagement at the state level down to the local level regarding job creation, job support, workforce development. And so there, in partnership with Jobs Ohio, we got to really understand and communicate with the state what was going to be the kind of workforce that we would need. And the governor's office, Governor DeWine and his team, along with Jobs Ohio, put together a package for the project that included and went beyond just what might have been included in a traditional project, but really went into and delved into responsively the kind of workforce that we communicated we would need and how they would, support and be a strong partner with us. Now, I call it a public-private partnership because we, Intel, committed $50 million to post-secondary education in Ohio over the next decade. And we just awarded and announced the awards in September for the first $17.7 million. And it was super exciting. I had multiple meetings with the community college and university leaders across the state. 8 collaborative proposals were the winners in the first round. But they put proposals together collaborating. So there were actually 80 schools across the state that put together proposals, and the funds are available for facilities, faculty development and education, scholarships for students, pipelining students into the program, again, at the 2 and the 4-year level. And then at the same time, we partnered with NSF, and we put an additional 50 million. NSF put 50 million in, and there's $100 million available nationwide for institutions nationwide to apply for funds to support semiconductor post-secondary education. So these are 2 examples, I would say, that are just a small example of something we were doing to support the Ohio project, and then in partnership with NSF drive something nationwide. But I think that these are just examples of where it's absolutely critical, and especially we know students drop out of STEM primarily at the middle school ages, and so it won't be enough. We're sponsoring all of these post-secondary programs. We do a fair amount K through 12, like John mentioned, at Qualcomm as well, because we know it's so critical to keep those students interested in and go into underserved communities and help people see why these jobs are great jobs. And even if they don't think of themselves as a technologist or a technician or a scientist, we have quick start programs now where you can go to a vocational facility, get a bunny suit, try some of the tasks, and maybe you're like, this is a job I might like. And we can't do that on our own. So for governors or, government leaders, community leaders on the call, we need partnering with you, and I'm super interested in your ideas as well.
That's such an important point that, part of filling these STEM jobs in the future is making sure that students today see themselves in those jobs, that they're able to do it, and that they don't opt out of the STEM subjects that are sort of prerequisite for opening up that pathway. I will come back to that because I think that's a point for us to just double click. But John, what other advice would you have for governors, mayors, and business leaders as they're thinking about, now let's throw in school leaders and higher education leaders as well, as they're thinking about how to compete for these funds? What should they be keeping in mind?
Yeah, so it's really about making sure to engage the local ecosystem. If we look at the stakeholders and industry, if we look at the talent needs pipeline, and then also recognizing the fact that, while the jobs are local, there is a huge amount of collaboration between institutions, right? When we look at the policies that enable this broad investment across the entire country, it's also about making sure different types of universities are working together. So we've actually really seen an improvement in that collaborative approach to that partnership where different universities, whether it's a tier one research university, whether it's a community college, whether it's a university that's growing in scale significantly in terms of the number of undergraduates it's educating. So that partnership side enables a further scale. And I think, as Christy mentioned, it's so important to start early. And you have then this perspective of making sure that the students who are interested in science, engineering, and math in the United States have this path to go through all the way with their education. And that comes back to the support level. It also comes back to mentoring, to making sure that we're leveraging the engineers who are already in these jobs, that they're reaching back, mentoring the students, serving as role models, making sure they can address also some of these systematic challenges. So when we look fully at the United States pipeline of talent, we have a huge population. We have a lot of interest in these areas. It's going to be so important for the country's national security as we look at supply chain and semiconductor resiliency, that we then all work together to recognize the full value of the human capital and making sure these people can attain their dreams. And so it's really exciting for me to be seeing a lot of these different plans be putting in place now, and then really to see the power of the CHIPS Plus Sciences Act, the full 5-year view, as we look at that overall allocation, looking at, hey, there's a broad view, whether it's Department of Commerce, NIST, NSF, all of these things working together, and then bringing that all the way back with enhanced access, bridging the digital divide. Even technologies like 5G enable more students to access classroom material wherever they are, regardless of their home internet. So there's a lot of exciting technologies that can further fuel this broader workforce engagement.
No, you're right. And also, I mean, the broadband dollars that are being allocated have workforce plans onto it too. So I know Commerce has been awarding planning grants to states, and they're thinking through the workforce for building out their broadband networks to underserved. And you're so right on the setting the collaborative table, so to speak, now, because that's going to pay off for those business leaders, governors, and education institutions for the chips dollars and for the infrastructure dollars. The IRA, there's a lot of energy programs that also require workforce. So all these things. You mentioned mentoring. The Department of Commerce's implementation plan also mentions mentoring. One of the things I was really thrilled to see is that they said they want to see proposals that are addressing not just training, but also the wraparound supports that allow people to participate in training. This is something we've seen quite often in higher education, that having access to education is important, but it's impossible to reach if you don't have childcare or transportation or things that allow you to take a course or participate. And what are some of the promising practices you've seen there that governors and business leaders should be keeping in mind? I mean, John, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Christy.
Yeah, so it's really about ensuring you're addressing, like, where's the real need, right? So you bring up some of these wraparound challenges, whether it's transportation, access to information, making sure that these students have that opportunity to learn, that they're not held back due to some challenge that's kind of outside of their control. And so we do see a lot of that focus now. And I think in some sense, the pandemic highlighted some of these challenges to make sure we have more digital equity, have more participation in learning, make sure we're giving more people access to more information that they can use when they need it, and that they can also match more flexible schedules. And so I think it's an interesting point where we see that being a real local challenge. And so as you bring up the role of the federal side and the state side and that partnership, you really do see new programs being developed, recognizing the talent in a given state at a local level, at a high school level, at an elementary school level. That also eventually feeds the opportunity economically in the state for those jobs over time. So we do see a more kind of end-to-end view emanating a lot at the state level. And I think that's a great emergence that couples so well with these CHIPS Plus Sciences funding. So we do see these things coming together to making sure we can more broadly address, having these students have these opportunities that then kind of break through some of these typical barriers they would have faced earlier.
Great points. Christy, your thoughts?
I would just underscore everything that John just said. And I think the partnership and helping us retain students in K through 12 interested in these fields of math and science is one. And then I think maybe second, leaning in if we work on maybe non-traditional vocational programs where we maybe bring folks out of industry segments that may be declining and help retrain and reskill them to join these growing economy segments will be an important potential aspect as well. And then I think we're partnering particularly in the places where we're expanding to make sure that we've got good line of sight to housing, transportation, daycare, healthcare, family support, and all the other things that make for a healthy, workforce and local economy.
That's amazing. Christy, we're out of time, Christy and John, but thank you for all that you're doing for your companies, for your communities, for the ways you're investing in America. And just we're so excited to see the ways you're going to leverage some of these federal funds to help improve America's competitiveness. So thank you for joining us today. And we're going to turn it back over to the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you.